Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Once upon a time, in the land of Babylon, there lived a young man named Ibrahim. He grew up in a society that worshipped idols. The statues were made by their own hands, but they still considered them to be God. His father, Azar, was even an idol maker. Since childhood, Ibrahim was amazed and wondered, how could an inanimate object become God? Abraham Aseks sought the truth by contemplating the universe. Allah guided him until he was convinced that only Allah was the only God worthy of worship. With strong determination, Abraham the Reesed began to preach to his people, inviting them to abandon idolatry and return to Allah. However, they rejected him and considered him crazy. One day, when the entire population was away celebrating a festival, Ibrahim A.S. saw an opportunity to prove the falsehood of idolatry. He entered the temple where they kept the statues and destroyed them one by one, except for the largest one. He then hung an axe around the neck of the largest idol and left. When the people returned, they were shocked to see their idols destroyed. They immediately searched for the culprit and realized that it was Ibrahim who had been opposing idol worship. Ibrahim A.S. was summoned and interrogated. He calmly replied, "Ask the biggest of these idols. Isn't it the one that is intact and has an axe?" The people became silent and realized that the idol could not speak or do anything. However, instead of repenting, they became angry and decided to punish Ibrahim A.S. by burning him alive. They built a giant fire and threw him into it. However, by Allah's permission, the fire became cold and did not burn Ibrahim A.S.'s body. This miracle further proved the truth of his preaching. The story of Ibrahim's struggle did not stop there. He also had to face King Nimrod, a tyrannical ruler who considered himself God. When Ibrahim invited Nimrod to worship Allah, the king arrogantly refused. He said, "I can also give life and death." As proof, he freed a prisoner who was about to be executed and killed another prisoner. Ibrahim A.S. then said, "Allah makes the sun rise from the east. If you are truly God, make it rise from the west." Namrud was silent, unable to answer the challenge. He became increasingly angry, but could do nothing. Finally, Allah sent down a punishment on Namrud in the form of a mosquito that entered his nose and continued to torment him until his death. The story of Prophet Ibrahim A.S. is proof of the steadfastness of faith and courage in upholding the truth. He showed that belief in Allah must be stronger than fear of man, and that truth will always triumph over falsehood. After Ibrahim A.S.'s victory over Namrud and his misguided people, he continued his missionary journey to various countries. He married Siti Sarah and then, by Allah's permission, also Siti Hajar. One day Allah ordered Ibrahim A.S. to take Hajar and her infant son, Ismail, to a barren land now known as Mecca. There was no source of water or sign of life there. With full faith, Hajar asked, "Is this the command of Allah?" Ibrahim A.S. nodded, so with full faith she accepted the decree, believing that Allah would not waste them. After some time, the water supply ran out, and little Ismail cried out of thirst. Siti Hajar ran between the hills of Safa and Marwa, trying to find water or help. After going back and forth 7 times, by the will of God, the spring of Zamzam appeared from under Ismail's feet. This miracle became a blessing for Mecca, which later grew into a holy city and center of worship. Years passed, and Ismail grew into a strong and pious young man. One night, Ibrahim A.S. received a revelation through a dream that he had to sacrifice his son as a form of obedience to Allah. Although this order was very difficult, both Ibrahim A.S. and Ismail accepted it with open hearts. When Ibrahim A.S. was about to slaughter his son, Allah replaced him with a sheep as a sign that they had passed the test of their faith. This incident became the origin of the sacrifice ritual in Islam. Ibrahim A.S. was also ordered to rebuild the Kaaba with Ismail A.S. as the first house of worship on earth. The two worked hard, lifting stones and arranging the sacred building while praying, "O our Lord, accept our deeds. Indeed, you are the all-hearing, the all-knowing." At the end of his life, Ibrahim A.S. left behind an eternal legacy of faith. He was the father of the prophets, and his descendants gave birth to great messengers such as Moses, David, Solomon, Jesus, and even Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. His story is an example of patience, steadfastness of faith, and sacrifice in carrying out the commands of Allah. Such is the life journey of Prophet Ibrahim a.s., a prophet who not only destroyed idols physically, but also freed humanity from worshipping other than Allah. His struggle teaches that truth will always triumph, even through severe trials. After building the Kaaba, Prophet Ibrahim a.s. continued to preach to various countries, inviting people to believe in Allah. His courage in facing tyrannical rulers such as King Nimrod and his idolatrous people made him famous as a fighter for monotheism. As a prophet, Ibrahim a.s. not only faced trials from his people, but also from within his family. One of the greatest trials was when he was ordered by Allah to leave Siti Hajar and Ismail in the barren desert of Mecca. However, thanks to their perseverance, the place turned into a prosperous city with the Zamzam spring. As the years passed, Prophet Ibrahim a.s. became known as a respected spiritual leader. Many people came to him in search of the truth. However, as was the case with other prophets, only a few accepted his message, while the majority remained in error. Before he died, Ibrahim a.s. made sure that his children remained on the path of Allah. He advised Ismail a.s. and Ishaq a.s. to always carry out Allah's commands and teach monotheism to the generations after them. Finally, after living a life full of trials, obedience, and sacrifice, Prophet Ibrahim a.s. passed away in a state of husnul khatimah. His legacy as the father of the prophets lives on to this day, and his story continues to inspire Muslims in carrying out their faith with steadfastness and sincerity. Until today, the Hajj and Qurban performed by Muslims around the world are a form of respect for the exemplary behavior of Prophet Ibrahim a.s. Every step in the Hajj, such as the sa'i between Shafa and Marwa, and the slaughtering of sacrificial animals, is a reminder of the piety and sacrifice of Prophet Ibrahim a.s. and his family in upholding the religion of Allah. May the story of Prophet Ibrahim a.s. always be a lesson for us to always hold fast to the truth, be patient in trials, and prioritize obedience to Allah above all else. After surviving the fire of King Nimrod, Prophet Ibrahim a.s. continued to preach to his people patiently. However, the majority of them still rejected the teachings of monotheism. In fact, his own father, Azar, firmly rejected Ibrahim's preaching and threw him out of the house. With a heavy heart, Ibrahim a.s. left his family in order to carry out Allah's command. Ibrahim a.s. then traveled to various countries, including Syria, Egypt, and Palestine. In every place he stopped, he continued to spread the teachings of monotheism, even though he often faced rejection and resistance. In Egypt, an important event occurred in his life. When the cruel king of Egypt wanted to take his wife, Siti Sarah, Allah protected Sarah by making the king unable to touch her. Finally, the king of Egypt released Sarah and gave her a servant named Hajar. After some time, Ibrahim a.s. and Sarah returned to Palestine. However, because they had not been blessed with children, Sarah sincerely asked Ibrahim a.s. to marry Hajar so that they could have children. From that marriage, a boy was born named Ismail a.s. When Ismail a.s. was still a baby, Allah ordered Ibrahim a.s. to take Siti Hajar and her son to the barren land which would later become Mecca. After arriving there, Ibrahim a.s. left them with only a small supply of water and dates. Siti Hajar asked, "Is this God's order?" Ibrahim a.s. nodded, and with full faith, Siti Hajar accepted this fate. After Ibrahim a.s. left, the water supply ran out, and Ismail a.s. began to cry of thirst. Full of anxiety, Siti Hajar ran between the hills of Shafa and Marwa 7 times to look for water or help. With Allah's permission, the Zamzam spring emerged from under the feet of Ismail a.s. This miracle made the place a blessed location, until it later became the center of Mecca. Years later, Ibrahim a.s. returned to Mecca and found Ismail a.s. had grown into a strong and pious young man. Allah then ordered him to build the Kaaba with his son as a center of worship for mankind. In the construction process, they worked together to arrange the stones and raise the walls of the Kaaba, while praying, "Our Lord, accept our deeds. Indeed, you are all-hearing, all-knowing." QS Quran Al-Baqarah 127. They also established worship rituals around the Kaaba. including Tawaf and Sa'i, which are still part of the Muslim pilgrimage. The middle of the story of Prophet Ibrahim (AS) is full of tests and unquestioning obedience to Allah. He taught that faith must be proven by patience, sacrifice, and full trust in God's provisions. King Namrud, a tyrannical ruler who claimed to be God, became one of the biggest enemies of the Prophet Ibrahim (AS). After a long debate between them, where Ibrahim (AS) proved the falsity of Namrud's claims by challenging him to publish the sun from the west, QS al-Baqarah 258, Namrud was unable to answer and felt humiliated in front of his people. However, because of his arrogance, he still refused to believe and instead increasingly oppressed people who followed the teachings of Ibrahim (AS). Allah did not allow Namrud's tyranny to continue forever. As punishment for his arrogance and disbelief, Allah sent a very small but deadly army, hordes of mosquitoes. The mosquitoes attacked the kingdom of Namrud, destroying agricultural products, making the people suffer and spreading disease. In fact, a mosquito entered Namrud's nose and moved to his brain. The mosquitoes continuously bit and tortured Namrud from inside his head, causing excruciating pain. To reduce the pain, Namrud ordered his servants to hit his head with a hammer or other hard object. However, nothing can cure it. The pain continued for years until finally Namrud died in disgrace and full of suffering. 1. Pride brings destruction. Namrud, who felt himself to be God, was finally defeated only by a mosquito, a small creature created by Allah. 2. Tyranny doesn't last long. Even though he ruled and oppressed many people, in the end Allah punished him in a way that he could not avoid. 3. God's power is unlimited. Allah can destroy even the strongest person in the simplest way. With the destruction of Namrud, Prophet Ibrahim (AS)'s preaching of monotheism became stronger. This story is clear proof that anyone who opposes God with pride will surely perish, no matter how much power he has. After the destruction of Namrud, the preaching of Prophet Ibrahim (AS) continued with full wisdom and determination. The death of the tyrant king became clear evidence for many people that human power is meaningless before the greatness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. However, although some people began to realize, many still remained in error and rejected the teachings of monotheism. Migration and spread of preaching. After leaving the kingdom of Namrud, Prophet Ibrahim (AS) continued his journey to various countries, including Palestine, Syria, and Egypt. In each place, he continued to call people to worship the one God and abandon idol worship. In Palestine, Ibrahim (AS) settled with his wife, Siti Sarah. However, because they had not been blessed with children, Sarah sincerely asked Ibrahim (AS) to marry Siti Hajar. From that marriage, Prophet Ismail (AS) was born, who would later become part of the great history of Islam. By Allah's command, Ibrahim (AS) took Siti Hajar and Ismail (AS) to the barren land that would later become Mecca. This event was the beginning of the formation of civilization in a place that was previously empty, until it finally became a holy city for Muslims, the end of the journey of Prophet Ibrahim (AS). As he got older, Prophet Ibrahim (AS) watched his children grow in faith. Ismail (AS) stayed in Mecca and became a leader there, while Ishaq (AS) continued his preaching in Palestine. Both of them continued the teachings of monotheism inherited from their father. After living a life full of trials, determination, and sacrifice, Prophet Ibrahim (AS) finally died in a state of Husnul Khatimah. He was buried in Hebron, Al-Khalil, Palestine, and to this day his grave is a historical site that is respected by many people. The eternal legacy of Prophet Ibrahim (AS). The struggle of Prophet Ibrahim (AS) not only became part of history, but also left traces that are still remembered today. 1. Kaaba as a center of worship. The holy building founded with Ismail (AS) has become a Mecca for Muslims. Second Hajj. Many rituals in the Hajj, such as the sa'i between Safa and Marwa and Wukuf on Arafah, originate from the struggle of Ibrahim (AS) and his family. 3. Sacrifice as a form of sacrifice. The incident of Ismail (AS)'s slaughter, which was replaced by a sheep, is a sunnah that Muslims continue to carry out every Eid al-Adha. 4th, exemplary in faith and obedience. Ibrahim AAS is known as Khalilullah, friend of Allah, because of his sincerity in carrying out every command. That is the story of Prophet Ibrahim AAS, a prophet who not only destroyed idols physically, but also freed people from worshipping anything other than Allah. His story is an example of courage, steadfast faith and sacrifice in carrying out the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. End of the story of Prophet Ibrahim AAS. After going through various major trials in his life, facing the king of Namrud, destroying idols, leaving his family in Mecca, building the Kaaba, and receiving the order to sacrifice his son, Prophet Ibrahim AAS finally the noble lineage of the prophets. From his descendants were born great prophets such as Prophet Musa AAS, Prophet David AAS, Prophet Solomon AAS, and Prophet Muhammad AAS. Conclusion: the story of Prophet Ibrahim AAS is the story of the struggle of a servant of Allah who is full of sacrifice, patience, and boundless obedience. He taught that trials in life are part of the journey towards true faith. As Muslims, we are taught to emulate the faith and steadfastness of Prophet Ibrahim AAS in living life, facing trials, and always adhering to monotheism. Hopefully this story will be a lesson for all of us to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, carry out His commands sincerely, and follow in the footsteps of the prophets in upholding the truth.